Hey y'all, hey friends, hey fools, hey kids. So yeah, I wanted to come on here and do some confession and some negrito, some blackening, sharing my stories, my confessions, my experience, my authenticity, my vulnerability, and my pain, my sorrow, my hopes, my joys, my frustrations, and my dreams for me and we. And I thought I would start out with a little song. So yeah, I thought I would start with a little drum and a little song. And it's been like very challenging and very difficult to contend with all of the challenges that are coming up and that are asking to be addressed and acknowledged and welcomed and integrated and honored. Yeah, it's for our growth and it's for our highest good, but it sure doesn't feel good and it feels like a mess. And so a lot of the times, we can find ourselves in resistance to it and just really almost locked in opposition to what is, because it hurts so much and because it brings up so much, anger and fear and misery and agony and suffering because of what, we believe about it or how we felt about it, And so compassion and mercy and grace. And one of the archetypes that I work with is Kuan Yin, and she's the goddess of compassion. And she has 1,000 eyes and 1,000 arms, and she is within all beings. And she holds that compassion and that mercy and that grace for all beings. There's a statue of Kuan Yin. Chinese Buddhism, she is the voice, the divine voice. The divine voice. And she is like the embodiment of that love and that pure compassion and acceptance that can hold it all, that can free it all, that allows it all to be all it is. Kuanchi Impusa, Namo 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 Kuanchi Impusa. And that chant fills the envelope of consciousness with compassion, mercy, and grace. And we can chant that and sing that and call on that, call on her, call on those energies, call on that compassion to raise our consciousness and to invite and welcome and embody that compassion. And so we can chant that for ourselves, and we can chant that for each other, and we can chant that for the earth. And that does help all of us, because that's what we really need right now is compassion and forgiveness and trust, you know. So there's some bridges that have been burned, you know, and destroyed. There's been threads in the web that have been destroyed. And what's asking for reclamation and reparation now is that bridge and those threads that have been destroyed and dishonored. And so, how can we rebuild that bridge in our own lives, back to each other and back to ourselves? And one of the ways that I've been shown that we do that, we reconstruct, is in and through telling our stories and sharing our stories and listening and being receptive to our stories, because our stories, you know, is what our experience is, and it's where we find meaning, you know, where we find the gift of being. And it is really all love, and it's all a game and a play and a stage for us. And all of it is made of stories, you know. So our stories are super important. And there have been stories that have been taken from us and have been distorted and changed and altered and turned upside down. And that's why, in a lot of ways, we may have a hard time navigating or orienting ourselves. And so what is needed is to reorient ourselves, to navigate through this new earth that we find ourselves coming into and in through. And so, let's go back to our roots, to the roots. So in indigenous cultures and tribes, whenever there was someone sick or unwell or not at ease, maybe in dis-ease, the medicine man or woman would ask them, when did you stop dancing? When did you stop singing? When did you stop telling and listening and enjoying stories? And so those are three things like of expression that we really do need for our well-being, and our psyche, like and our soul needs those things and those gifts of expression to be well and to be full and to be whole and to be free and to be reminded and to remember the totality of all we be. And so in a lot of ways, our stories, have been hijacked from us. And like, we all love our stories. We all love telling stories, and we all love like our stories on the television, and our pop culture stories, and our character stories, and whatever stories we like. Like, that's why certain shows on TV or certain movies or whatever really speak to us in certain ways, even if we can't really identify like what it is about the story or the theme, or there's something in it that does speak to us. It either speaks to our soul, or it speaks to different wounded aspects of ourselves, or it smears and it shows, and it's like giving us a message. If we can see those messages in certain ways, or if we can be open to receiving the wisdom within the story. And sometimes we can reconstruct our stories if we have the bones, if we can see the bones of the story. And the bones are usually what's indestructible. The bones are like the essence and the basics of the story. And if we have the bones of a story, we can reconstruct the story. And that's like what Clarissa Pinkola Estes says in her book Women Who Run with the Wolves. And that one's about Loloba, that archetype. And her specialty is wolves. And she's an old crone, and you'll find her in the desert wastelands after much searching. And she's a character. And there's not very much known about her. But if she welcomes you and she invites you, there's a reason why. But a lot of the time, maybe she'll never show herself. But Loloba, she's the one that sings over the bones. She's the one that breathes life back into that which has almost become lost to the world. So her specialty is in gathering the bones of a wolf. And she will gather and she will collect all of the bones. And she will arrange them, and she will lay them out in all of the sequences of their belonging. And then when she has a space and feels that it's all connected correctly, she'll bring that which is in her, all the feeling, all of the emotion, all of that energy. She'll bring that forth. And she will sing her heart out, her soul over the bones, and bring that which has almost been lost back into the world through breathing that life and singing over those bones. And then as she sings, the wolf starts to fill out with little muscles and sinews and tendons, recreating itself, restructuring itself, coming together, coming alive again. And then little bits of hair and all the little things that make it what it is start to come together with this focus and this attention and this devotion, the singing over the bones. Welcoming that wildness and that truth and that which is precious back into the world. And then when that wolf has been all sung back together again, it leaps up joyfully and runs out into the distance, and then turns into a woman, and you can hear her laughing and laughing and laughing. She's wild again, dancing, running, singing. blessing the world with her presence and that which was almost lost. So, yeah, that's what we get to do. We get to bring forth that which is in us, because that which is in us, if we bring that forth, it will save us. If we do not bring forth that which is in us, that which is in us will destroy us. And so, yeah, there's something to that. So what are the bones of story? What are the bones of your stories? What are the bones of old stories that speak to you? Yeah, maybe investigate that, look into that, be willing to see into that. So we all have our own stories and we all have our own experiences. We all have our ways of being and expressing and perceiving and being a part of that experience, playing a part in that experience. So we need all the parts and we need all the players, you know, all the roles. We've been all things to all. Sometimes we're the hero in the story. Sometimes we're the villain in the story. Sometimes we're the asshole in the story. Sometimes we're the sinner in the story. Sometimes we're the saint in the story. Every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. You know. So let's not be so quick to condemn. We really have no idea what other demons others are fighting, what other triumphs people have experienced and overcome, you know, what they've overcome to experience their victories, you know. And so maybe in a way, if we shared our stories, we could let go of the need to compete and compare and know that it's a unique story for everyone. You know, we can relate and we have similarities and different, certain themes that are the same or different or completely opposite. But, you know, we can still relate and maybe understand or maybe gain an understanding through listening and telling and sharing our true stories. And yeah, there's a quote I love. It's like a little invocation and by Leigh J. McCloskey, and the end part of it goes, yes, let us tell our most beautiful and wonderful stories of being human simply because we can. And so yeah, what stories are we telling, and what stories do we like to tell each other, and what stories do we find ourselves mostly telling or reviving or, you know, like creating with? Like, what kind of stories are we telling and sharing? And are they true stories? Are they made up stories? Are they victim stories? Are they hero stories? Are they ain't it awful stories? Or are they what's possible and how amazing, how wonderful, how interesting, how curious stories, you know? What kind of stories are we telling? And all stories are, you know, just a story. But like, it's the power and the meaning and all of that we give the story, you know, that makes a story. And sometimes there are stories that we tell that we're not even aware of, or stories that we believe in that we don't know, like, what that origin is or where it came from. And so, yeah, there's some stories we get to look at, and there's some stories that we get to discover, and there's some stories that we get to write and we get to author, or that we get to turn around, or that we get to change, or that we get to add to, or that we get to, you know, play with, play through these stories. So what stories are we playing, and what stories are we playing in? What stories are we playing through? And so it's part of like what I've been working with today is the pen, or the word, is mightier than the sword. But like the sword, I have a sword here. It's my little visual aid. This cool sword. The sword has been coming up a lot for me lately. And so it's like the sword of truth. It's so sharp that it cuts the two together. It's so sharp that it makes the two one, instead of cutting one apart. And so I think there's something to that. And it's the sword that cuts away all the demons, slays the body of the mind and the soul. Slays the demons of the body, mind, and soul. So it's a powerful weapon. Powerful weapon of truth. So, a lot of people may not know like how powerful the power of suggestion is, and how like programmable we really are, especially when we're really young. When we're from the ages of 0 to 7, we're highly programmable. And that's where a lot of our core beliefs and a lot of our wounded aspects and a lot of old archetypal patterns stem from those years of training and conditioning and programming and the indoctrination, the cultural and generational indoctrination that we grow up in. And yeah, it's just been a part of our lives, and it's been like the stories that we pass on, almost like our oral histories, except for it's become corrupted in a certain way because it's been hijacked in a lot of different ways. But that's another story for another time. And so the power of the word is like one of the most powerful things there are. The power of the word, the power at our disposal to use our word with integrity, to use our word with impeccability, to realize the responsibility and the accountability that we have through honoring our word, and the personal power that we can develop through like being true to our word and honoring our word and making that agreement that's part of the 4 agreements of being impeccable with our word. And that, you know, there's a lot to that, and it's a personal practice, and so it is personal, and so it's probably a different experience for each person, their own personal practice of that. So there's also the power of intent, which is a very, very, very powerful thing. Like, what are we intending, and what is that power of intent? You know, and the power of our belief actually too creates the power of our perception. And so it's not really seeing that's believing, you know? It's like what we believe is what we see in a lot of ways. Like, it has nothing to do with what we really see in a lot of ways. And so maybe look deeper into that. Like, what do we really see? And does it reflect what we're really seeing or able to perceive? Or is it a filter that we're looking through because there's the overlying or underlying belief? And so what I wanted to talk about today are the inverted structures of power, and why things have been operating the way that they have been operating in certain ways. Like, we kind of grow up like kind of believing that, oh, this is just the way the world is, this is just the way things are, this is the way things are done, and all of that. No, it's not a random thing. It's actually been engineered and designed that way, like to keep us in a little box and to keep us from using our imagination and the power of our word and the power of our love, the power of our choice and the power of our creativity. And then really that's the power of our imagination, and we don't really understand, we haven't really realized how powerful our imagination is and how powerful our attention is and all of that. So how could we be also collectively misled and confused and, you know, upside down, like in this upside down world? Like how could we all be so wrong, or how could everything that we've ever been taught be so wrong, you know? And so there is a lot to that, and there's a lot of stories that have been concocted and sold and then parroted and then taken as fact and reality and as history, when really it's the victors that rewrite history, and those that want to hold on to the power, you know, that need to ever expand on that power. They're the ones that, you know, usually have control over what stories are told and what stories are acceptable and yeah, all of that, even though it's kind of ironic in a lot of ways where we're being shown certain stories in certain ways in certain media, yeah, that are mixed with fiction and fact a lot of the time. And a lot of the science fiction is closer to fact than the actual like news stories are closer to fact. And so, yeah, I know that sounds a little odd if you haven't looked into things other than what the establishment stories, like, if you haven't looked beyond those, then you're probably not going to understand what I am talking about and where I'm going with this. But, like, maybe I'll have different levels later of compassionate disclosure. Those who are fence sitters, those who kind of know, who are ready to know a little more, or those who just don't really know anything, and those who are in the know, who are aware of the structures, and who are aware of what's happening now. And so, um, but for today, I just wanted to bring up a few things to kind of sum up a few reasons, like why our stories are important, and why we get to reclaim our stories, and why we get to reclaim our symbols, and why we get to reclaim our imagination and our power to create. And so I wrote down a few things. So in order for us to understand the inverted power structures, like, yeah, there's some things that rely on that existence of that power structure to exist, and part of that is like the story and the mythology around it. And like one of the core beliefs or the core stories that prop up that inverted power structure is as a compartmentalized, fragmented version of the story and its disconnection. And so, like, what that false story and that false mythology is that the universe is dead, cold, chaotic, accidental, hostile, random, and dangerous. And it's something to dominate, control, and possess. It's something to name and negate and rape. It's an object, it's not a living thing. Life, nature, and wildness are seen as things to exploit and dominate, and not to honor and enjoy and be a part of, you know, and get to know. And so, like, that is like the basis for lack, scarcity, illness, disconnection, and disease. If the universe is a cold, dead, chaotic thing and it has no rhyme or reason or order to it, like, that actually really does disempower and disengage and disconnect us from being like part of the axis mundi, or that center, that whole, that center of wholeness that's in relation itself in relation to the whole. Like, it knows itself in relation to the whole. So it really does like compartmentalize and fragment our vision of what really is, and our true belonging and our true vision, you know, that we have. And so that's the denial of the soul and the feminine, and the divine feminine. And so that's what's been missing, and that's what's been lacking, and that is basically like an imbalance. And it's like based on like the left brain of logic, and it discounts like the inherent intelligence in the body and in matter, and in the matter and mater and mother and the matter of all things. That matter is spirit that moves slow enough for us to see it, and to have this experience, and to be in this time, to have time to be able to manifest things, and to be able to have this experience, this amnesia of forgetting who we are, which is a part of everything, a part of God that knows everything, you know. It's just so we could have this experience to come down and forget and remember remember being, you know, and becoming. And so, yeah, it's just kind of funny. Like, we go through these cycles of remembering and forgetting, and it's a dance, and yeah, it's just something we get to play with, we get to be and experience. And so, yeah, there's a reason why we've been compartmentalized and why we've been disconnected, because then we forget like our own power, and like that we are connected to everything, and that we have everything within us already, and that we are, like creator beings, children of the creator. So we're all connected to each other, and we're all part of each other. We're a part of this beautiful earth, our Mother Earth. And yeah, we get to remember that. And so the earth and life and the universe is a living being. We're all part of that living being. We're all different cells in that, within that being. It's the microcosm and the macrocosm, and we are the mesocosm. And there are the three worlds, And so, yeah, there are many, 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 many worlds. Worlds within worlds within worlds. A lot of people can only really believe in what they can see, hear, touch, taste, smell, experience, all of that. And there's a lot more to life than that. And it's kind of ironic too, in a lot of ways, where sometimes we only rely on our senses to tell us what is. But actually, sometimes we're not even using our senses, and we're checked out of our senses. And because we're always in our head, And it's the separation of mind and body, mind, heart, and body. And so, like, that's another fragmented, fragmentation or compartmentalization as well. And so, like, let's go back to our roots. Let's get back into our bodies. Let's come back to our senses. I think there's a quote by Oscar Wilde that says, "The only remedy for the soul is the senses, and the only remedy for the senses is the soul," or something like that. Yeah, like, so it's like it's related, connected. And that is like the irrational intelligence of the feminine that we have to work with. And that's intuition, and that's the wisdom, the irrational intelligence of our body, of our gut, and of nature. Nature has this incredible intelligence, this living intelligence. And if we don't understand that, and we deny nature as an organ of the divine, then we deny all revelation to ourselves, And that was a quote in my tarot revision book that I read a couple months ago too. I'll have to get that out next time. Yeah, when we deny nature as an organ of the divine, we deny like our ability to receive revelation, through nature, and through like that direct conduit that we are, to have a direct relationship with God, with the universe, with love, with this energy, with this intelligence that is consciousness. And so let's remember, that we are connected, and we have that direct relationship with God, our creator, and that direct link in relationship with life, and through life. We are life, and we are a part of God, and we are a part of her. We are a part of life and love, and we're having this experience together, and we get to remember. We get to remember ourselves. We've been fragmented and dismembered, but now it's time to remember. And so, yeah, be willing to remember. Be willing to remember our connections and the direction, all directions and all ways. So I just want to talk a little bit about why maybe I have like certain different perceptions and experiences and views than a lot of people, I guess, that have gone through this structured system of domination and control. And part of that is, well, I was given a blueprint and a gift of my being that wouldn't allow me to settle for less than what my soul needed. And every time that I did, I really suffered greatly. Every time I went against myself, I really did suffer really greatly. And so after suffering for a lot of my life, and part of that is my karmic debt number is number 16, and that's the archetype of the tower, where when we're not aligned with the things that our soul needs, then everything collapses. And so I've gone through many collapses and restructuring, but every time it wasn't in alignment, of course it would fall down again, and things would collapse and things would end, and there would be loss and there would be devastation. And after so much pain and suffering, it's just like, you kind of have different ways of responding to that after a little while. Okay, I'm listening now. Like, it's just kind of funny, like sometimes what we need to go through, or what we get to go through to learn things for ourselves, And a lot of the time that suffering is, self-made or whatever. And there's been a lot of interference, and there has been a lot of self-destructive programming that has been kind of pushed on us and impressed upon us, the self-destructive programming, and so yeah, there's a lot to that. But yeah, what I want to share is in Utah, I really got when I moved here, when my family and I moved here when I was a teenager to Utah from Vegas. It was definitely a different experience, and that's when I actually started to become assertive and a little rebellious and things, because things were so freaking just it was just crazy cliquey, and a culture of conformity, really, and it just it didn't sit well with me, and it didn't feel good, and it felt fake to me in a lot of ways. And so that's when my inner rebel started to emerge, when I was about 15, 16, and she's been a good ally. And it was like definitely a survival strategy archetype for me to protect myself, and for me to be able to express myself, and in certain ways. But there's a light and a dark side to that rebel, and I'm aware that sometimes, like, my rebel would just come out because I don't like being told what to do. I don't like being forced like, at all. I don't want to force other people to do something that they don't want to do. That like really just insults my soul. Like, forcing anything on anyone is just not something I'm okay with. Like, whether I'm on the giving or the receiving end of that, no, it's just not not something that sits well with me. And so, like, a lot of the times the rebel was an ally or a familiar for me, because it was a knee-jerk reaction to, don't tell me how to live my life, don't tell me what to do, and I will do it just because you're telling me not to, like. And so I've always had that kind of a almost extreme all or nothing personality in certain ways, although, like, I am pretty temperate and reliable and moderate and easygoing and stable. For those who actually do know me, like, know, like, that I'm a pretty balanced, centered person. But, like, of course, I do have my triggers and my wounds and all of that too. And so my mom could probably, and my dad could probably tell you stories about my rebel and what my rebel got to put them through when I was a teen. But my rebel really helped me when I was a teen. Like, really, like, stand up for myself and speak up for myself and make choices for myself, and reject what didn't feel good for me to agree to. And so, yeah, so I've always been like a little rebel at heart since I was a teenager, you know, like when I needed to be, she was activated. so, um, so I've always been curious and I've always asked questions, and I wouldn't go along with things just to go along because, yeah, that was lame to me. Like, nah, I don't want to do it that way. I'll do it my way. But of course, like, there's always certain ways that we do go along to fit in or to find a way to fit in or to belong. And so, yeah, like, in certain ways, the caregiver was my way to belong because naturally I could empathetically see what another needed, or um, maybe, yeah, like how to belong by fulfilling other needs that were kind of apparent to me. And so kind of got addicted to that, like of anticipation of, well, what needs can I meet and how can I give today, and how can I, yeah, fit myself into the scheme of things and stuff. But of course it was always because it was a love of service and a love of that, like giving and caring, because I really do genuinely care about people, and I've always wanted to help people and love people. I've always wanted to be a mother. I've always wanted to teach people, and I've always wanted to serve people. But yeah, like, so there's a light and dark aspect of the caregiver as well, in those ways where sometimes the caregiver can turn into a martyr, and then once, you know, that's activated, then the caregiver becomes a miser too. And sometimes that miser can be directed toward our own self and our own needs and caring for our own selves, like thinking that we don't deserve it or we're not worthy of that care or that we just can't do it, or yeah, whatever story there is there. And so it's kind of funny how like some of those pairs work together in certain ways, like, and yeah, it's just something to look into and explore for everyone on their path, and if they're interested in looking at these different patterns, you know. And so, um, yeah, it was kind of easy in certain ways for me to put my finger up at the status quo and say, nah, I don't want your bullshit, you know, like in a lot of ways. And sometimes it was like trendy, like to go against the grain, or yeah, to be a punk, or to be like whatever. And so, like, yeah. And then a lot of the times it is like a phase that we go through when we're growing up and asserting ourselves and finding out like who we are and where we fit in, and yeah, all of that. And but my rebellious nature has always been a big part of me. So one of my dominant archetypal blueprints is the rebel, and that's like what I was born with to help me on my mission and on my path and with my purpose. And so I super appreciate my rebel and my rebelliousness and my courage in going against like the mess in certain ways, like that everyone runs towards. And so, but it caused me a lot of grief and pain sometimes, as I felt like the black sheep of the family, or the orphan, or the exile, or the one that was scorned, you know, for doing it my way, for needing to do it my way, or for needing to separate myself from the group and from what insulted my soul, you know, and didn't feel true for me, didn't feel right for me. And so I did drop out of school in high school. Barely made it through 10th grade, as I was getting in a lot of trouble and drinking a lot, and just school was really stupid to me. And yeah, it just felt like a bunch of bullshit. It didn't really feel like yeah, it really felt like it was just a bunch of crap to keep us busy and like really training us socially and psychologically and stuff for a lot of things. And I just really like it. Really, like, I had an aversion to it. I couldn't get up in the mornings. I didn't want to. It wasn't something I wanted to sit through all day anyways. And it was really super miserable to me to be around all the fakeness and just the falseness, and what like felt like the complete opposite of welcoming home, or that feeling of welcome home to me. It was the complete opposite. So I did not want to be there. And that's what like life kind of felt like for me. It's like it was inhospitable and it was hostile and it was just a mess, and I didn't want to be here. And so, I did choose, like, in a way, okay, fine, I have to be here, fuck it, you know? And so that's where my addict came in too, where, okay, well, I'm just gonna enjoy and I'm gonna have fun and I'm gonna get fucked up and I'm gonna experience life and I'm gonna do it my way, And yeah, so like the hedonist there, of like, fuck all that, and but I'll go play around with that. And so yeah, I got my share of lessons in and through the hedonist and being an addict. Starting to smoke when I was 15. Just, it wasn't really that enjoyable, but I felt like a rebel, and I felt like it was kind of like it made other people stay away from me. So it was kind of like some kind of shield, because it would make people like that were judgy and stuff that I didn't like anyways. It just like kind of shoved them away a little bit. So it was like, hey. And so it was my way of saying fuck you to life, and fuck you to your morals, and fuck you to your judgments and your scripts and your bullshit ways of like operating, fuck all of this noise, fuck it, and fuck you. And it was really like, fuck this life. Really, a lot of it. It was about anger, and it was a way for me to suck in my anger and hold on to that anger and and just use it as like something that was a substitution for what I really needed, and that was like to be able to live and enjoy my life. But I didn't know I had that choice. I didn't know there was, another way. But this was part of it, like always. So it's kind of funny in a way like that, like our decisions can in certain ways harm us, but like we're already hurting, and so it's like we're hurting ourselves because we're already hurting. And so there's like recycling pain, and the same old stories, and the victim stories, and the addict stories. And so sometimes we don't realize that we are addicted to our pain and our suffering and the rage and the anger and the blame. And we get to reclaim our power and own our power, and see where we've given our power away, or see what choices are available that weren't available, or we didn't see were available before. So, so being a rebel and dropping out of school, just couldn't handle like some of that. And the programming, we're all programmed through different ways and through different mediums. Okay. And so some of that programming I was able to avoid by avoiding school and not like buying into it really, in a way, like with the carrot on the stick, like you got to go to college and you get to do this and you get to do that, and then you're a good boy and you're a good girl, and then you just, it's all fairy tale stories after that. That's where you climb the ladder and you just work hard, and it's the American dream, and all that jazz. And I'm not like putting down like people who genuinely chase their dreams and go after what they want and actually put action, and they dream and put effort into like accomplishing those things. That's a totally different story than going along with certain programs. So I just want to clarify that. And I do believe like in the power of action, and in following nudges and impulses, and that and making the room for inspired actions to be expressed through us, and all of that. So not discounting that magic at all, but just the engineered programs that get us to chase something or achieve something that's outside of us, in those ways, if that makes sense. So there are a lot of stories. And what I was always drawn to, though, I always wanted to understand others, and I wanted to understand myself, because nothing made sense. There was something off about the world, and I just knew there was something that I just wasn't seeing about it. And if I kept asking questions, or following my curiosity, I knew like I'd find something. And so, like, I've always been curious, and I never let that curiosity die, and I never let my imagination die, because my imagination was my place, my sanctuary to escape. And so I was blessed that way, where I didn't have my imagination killed or hijacked from me in certain ways. And so I've always had a vivid inner world, and I've always been an introvert, and I have that appreciation for seeing deeply into the layers of things. And we are many layered, and we're multi layered. And so we're multi-dimensional beings. And we're not just this thing that we can see. We're so much, 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 much more. And so if you know about the visible light spectrum and the invisible light spectrum, like, and you know about like the aura, and you know about thermal currents and all of that, there are definitely things that exist that we can't see with the naked eye. And there are definitely things that even instruments of modern day science tells us that, like, you know, like those instruments cannot pick up, but they're there. Or like, and it's not like, yeah, in a lot of ways it's kind of funny that we use like this belief in scientism, that science can prove all these things or whatnot. Like, it's kind of funny that, like, yeah, our beliefs about like science and about what science can do and what science does, like the programs that have been sold to us about that, when there are so many different sciences and so many different ways to experience life and all of that. So it's just kind of funny, like, how they box it all in, when real science is not boxed in, and it doesn't have any biases, and it doesn't have any preconceived notions. And yeah, so, you know, like, look at the way that pharma science operates, and then look at the way that actual science operates. There's a big, huge, huge, huge difference. One has interests, and one only seeks knowledge and expansion. Yeah. So, obedience to authority. Have you guys heard of the milligram experiment? Okay, so older people totally will remember this, and my dad told me about this when I was a teenager. And so, yeah, it was after World War II, and it was done at, I want to say it was Stanford, but maybe it was Harvard. It was done by Stanley Milgram, and his reasons for doing it, he says, were he had two or family relatives in concentration camps, and he wanted to know what makes a group of people or individuals trust authority or obey authority or follow orders. Like, what is it about human psychology and about like the social structure and hierarchies that will have good, well-meaning people do horrendous things and follow orders and create like the devastation and participate in the genocide, mass genocide of other human beings. And so obedience to authority is something that's great to look at. And it's just kind of funny because we all know that like the power that we give to external authority, or to those who we put in those places or those positions of authority. And yeah, back then in the 50s and the 60s, like people knew, yeah, like how much authority, power, or how much power that people give to authority, and how much power they think authority has, and how they will give their authority away to that power because of that seeming authority that they have. And it's just a really like interesting thing that we don't understand what's playing out now. Like, we think that we've changed or that we've gotten wise to it in certain ways, but we have not, we really haven't. And so if we can see through some of these things, like especially the programming that's happened in the last 20 years, where it is like all about a script of trust the science, trust the experts, trust the science, trust the experts, trust the science, trust the experts, trust what we're telling you. And, you know, yeah, like we want to believe that we're in control of our own mind and our own unconscious. But if we're giving our power away to things outside of ourselves, we're not. And if we're not we're not programming our own minds, something or someone else outside of us is programming it. You can be sure of that. There are so many programs running. And so, yeah, we need to become aware of that, what programs are running, and what are those programs operating from? What operating system are they running from? So, obedience to authority, this little experiment, I totally recommend looking at it, reading it. Even if you don't look at the book, just look it up online and look into it. And there's also a movie, Winona Ryder was in it. It was called The Experimenter. It came out a couple years ago. Please watch it. Please watch it and start to understand that people will like go against their own conscience and their own feelings for the greater good, because authority says, yes, this experiment must continue. And yeah, for whatever reason they give, and the person goes against their own thoughts and their wishes and their own desires and their own conscience, their own feelings, their own instincts, because they think the authority is correct, or the authority is right, and the authority will take responsibility for anything that happens. But we're responsible for our actions. We're responsible for the orders that we follow. We're responsible, for the choices that we make. It's not up to someone else that's giving us an order to take that responsibility. We're accountable for those actions. We're accountable for that choice to give that authority away, or to claim our own authority, or claim our own power, or be loyal to our own instincts and our own feelings and our own conscience. So 35% of people in that experiment I think 35% refused to go to the end of the experiment. And what that experiment was it was set up to have volunteers come in and think that they were participating with another volunteer, but the other volunteer was actually a plant who knew what was going on and was just part of the experiment. But the other person, the volunteer, did not know that. And so there was what was called a learner and a teacher, and each of the volunteers that really didn't know like the full scope of the experience, they were called the teacher, and the one that knew what was going on was called the learner. And what the volunteer teacher thought was happening was that the learner would be given a series of questions to see like how under stress like people could retain certain information or answer certain answers correctly. And each time they got a question wrong, they would receive a shock of electric volts, and it would get progressively higher and higher. The shocks would get stronger and stronger. And so, yeah, they would keep shocking this person who is getting the answers wrong, this actor, this learner. And the actor would, pretend that they were in pain, that they were hurting, that they had a heart condition, that they didn't want to do it anymore. But the volunteer, the teacher, would ask the authority, hey, is this okay? Or he doesn't seem to be liking that, or he doesn't sound good in there. And the person in the lab coat would say, it's okay. They'll be okay. You need to continue the experiment. So the person would just like, okay. And they would keep ignoring and keep continuing with the experiment and keep administering shocks to this person who actually wasn't receiving the shocks, but they didn't know that. They thought they were actually shocking this person. And in certain ways, yeah, they were able to record like certain behavior when people question themselves, or if people wouldn't ask questions at all about it, or they would just kind of go along with like a one-word script of the experiment must continue. And they went, most people, except for 35%, the rest went all the way through where they actually thought that they were actually, the learner was actually in danger of losing his life. They actually went that far to continue, to follow orders and continue the experiment. And some people were very, very, very distraught and very concerned and actually like getting very ill themselves and crying about it, but they still went through with it. And some people like actually seemed to enjoy inflicting pain or thought that the person deserved it because they kept getting it wrong and they were just frustrated with them. And so some people seem to like enjoy like inflicting pain like in certain ways, like where they enjoyed having that power over someone. And yeah, and some people just towards the end, you're just like, no, I don't care. I refuse to continue this experiment. This experiment does not need to continue, you know. And so yeah, we just don't know like where we would be. We would hope that we would be one of those that would say, no, I'm not going to continue with this. But do we really know? Like, yeah, and so that's just one thing that I wanted to bring up. Again, is obedience to authority. How obedient are we, and to what extent are we going to be obedient and follow orders? And, you know, like, are we going to take accountability and responsibility for the choices that we're making? And or are we going to say we just didn't know when we were following orders, you know? I mean, yeah, let's look at these things, please, you know? And maybe some of you might think, well, what does that have to do with anything that's happening today? Well, it has everything to do with what's happening today. And I hope that we'll be able to realize and see that before we continue to the end of the experiment, okay? So, yeah. And that's just what I wanted to share today about that. And I have lots of other stories, lots more stories that I really do want to share and express and convey. But yeah, thanks for listening, and thanks for letting me share with you. And what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts about obedience to authority and taking accountability for our actions and our choices and actually thinking outside the box? And what stories are being told to keep us in conformity and to keep us in a little box, you know, and to keep us giving our power away to what we perceive as external authority or to an expert, you know. So, good things to chew on and contemplate and digest and maybe assimilate and process. And so, all right, I hope you guys are all well, and thank you. Be well, take good care of yourselves. Okay, ciao.